Ryan Clark is a wild boy. Ryan Clark is. To be fair, like when he first popped up in ESPN, Ryan Clark was a fresh of breath air. I remember he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I always got much love for Ryan Clark. Back in 07, he has the sickle cell trait, and he played the Denver Broncos, and they have less oxygen, high altitude, and he had a medical crisis, and he ended up losing his spleen and his gallbladder. He had to take those out. And he still played after that, but Mike Tomlin said, no, I can't have you play in Denver. It's like, you can play against everybody else, but you can't play in Denver, because that thing could have really did some serious damage. Like, he lost, a spleen and a gallbladder. So he's a tough boy, man. So when he first popped up at ESPN, he had some hardcore takes, man. It's like, oh, I like Ryan Clark. And now he has to pivot, that podcast. But man, over the past few years, his takes has been crazy. And one of the wildest takes right now is his take on Chris Brown. He said that Chris Brown is the greatest entertainer who ever lived. And it's like, how in the world can you possibly say this? Now, again, no offense to Chris Brown. I think Chris Brown has been grossly underrated over the past 20 years. Chris Brown, if he is part of the 106 and Park generation, he came through during that time period. And the only people who are left who are relevant is him and Rihanna. And Rihanna doesn't make music anymore because she's become a billionaire under Fenty. So she got the whole Fenty brand. So he is like the last of the Mohicans from 106 and Park, because everybody else, like Bow Wow, B2K, they got like oldies tours. T-Pain, there's nobody else from that era, I think, who came through the 106 and Park era who has been dominant as Chris Brown. I think he has that great ear for music. Like, one of the greatest things he has is an ear for music. He knows how to find hits. If you go from Run It in the mid-2000s to Residuals in 2025, you're doing something right. And then also all these ladies and some dudes are paying all this money for the meet and greets. He sold out stadiums in Africa. No, sooner or later, BET's going to have to give him one of their awards. MTV won't do it, but it's time for BET to start acknowledging this guy as one of the greatest artists of his era. I'll say that. But Ryan Clark is saying he's the greatest artist, greatest entertainer, period. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You got Michael Jackson, you got Prince, you got Marvin Gaye, you got Stevie Wonder, you got James Brown. Here's the thing. So I was going to make a whole video talking about Prince and Michael and how Ryan was wrong. And so how old is Ryan? Because I know he's not young, but he's not really that old. So he's 45. So he's 45 years old. He is an older millennial. Old enough to know better, but he's an older millennial. So he's born in 79. 79 is the same year Off the Wall comes out. So, okay. Thriller comes out in 1982. Purple Rain comes out in 1982. At that point, he's like 3 years old. Purple Rain comes out in 1984. At that point, he's in kindergarten. So having any argument with him about Michael Jackson and Prince is almost useless, just because he was a toddler and doing finger paint when me and my friends was listening to Let's Go Crazy and When Doves Cry. So I can understand if he doesn't have the same affinity for Michael and Prince like I do. I said, okay, fine. But he was a 90s baby. So he saw Usher Raymond when he first came out with Call Me a Mac on the Poetic Justice soundtrack. He saw Destiny's Child when it came out with Say My Name and Bills, Bills, Bills and No, No, No. Like, he saw the birth of Beyonce during that standpoint. He saw the genius singing of R. Kelly. He saw Casey and Josie and Boyz II Men and Mariah Carey. He saw Whitney. Like, he's seen greatness of the 90s. And the way he really, oh man, I won't say capes for Chris Brown, but the way that he praises Chris Brown, you would think that he's a Gen Zer. You would think that he's Drewski. Drewski is like 30 years old. So he's smack dab in Gen Z. So it's like, if Drewski was saying this, if Drewski was saying like Chris Brown is the greatest entertainer ever lived, I would say, okay, Drewski is 30. So of course he's going to say that. But Ryan Clark is like, what are you doing? Now again, if he loves Chris Brown, that's totally fine. Tank also made this claim about Chris Brown as well. Now, to be fair, if a young person was coming up to me and say, hey man, I got $200, Beyonce tickets will cost way too much money, who do you think I should spend my money on? And there's only a few people I would say when it comes to R&B, I would spend my money on today. Probably, if you want to see a really good show and an entertainer, probably Usher, Bruno Mars, Chris Brown, if you can't afford the Beyonce tickets. It's not a lot of people that I would recommend, because most artists today, even if they're really good singers, all right, they're not going to put on a show like a Bruno or an Usher. And the thing about Chris Brown is Chris Brown, born 1989. So he was the last of that era that includes Beyonce, Bruno, Rihanna, Adele, Katy Perry, that whole crew that came through the 2000s. They're the last of an era who did see Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson and Madonna, who really put on a great show, or Bruce Springsteen or Prince. Like they might have not have been around when these artists first came out, maybe in the 80s, but they saw them in different performances and realized, man, that's greatness personified. And even Chris Brown, I don't know if Chris Brown would ever say that he's the greatest entertainer ever. I don't think Chris Brown would ever say that, because Chris Brown said his main influences are Michael Jackson and Usher, followed by Rick James and Bobby Brown and Marvin Gaye. Like Chris Brown at a younger age than Ryan Clark probably has more reverence for artists of the past than Ryan Clark. Now I get it. Like when you go to these Chris Brown concerts, it's like a combination of Michael Jackson and Bon Jovi. He's flying in the crowd, spinning around. He's entertaining. Like he really puts on a great show. But he doesn't have the greatest vocal. He has a good vocal. He has a great vocal. He might actually have an underrated vocal, but he doesn't have the same vocal as a Prince. He doesn't have the same vocal of a Michael Jackson or R. Kelly. Like he doesn't. Chris Brown's never had that vocal, but he knows how to sing within his range. He sings within his range how New Edition, like Ralph Tresvant, know his range. Bobby Brown knows his range. Like these guys kind of know where they are. Like Chris Brown is even the vocalist of Johnny Gill, right? So from a vocal standpoint, you're not going to get a guy who's really going to belt it out, but he's going to give you a lot of hits and you're going to be entertaining. When you leave a Chris Brown concert, you're going to be like, man, that's like one of the best concerts I've ever seen for today. Because there's not a lot of great artists who put on great concerts today. Who do you have? Like you have Beyonce, you have Bruno, you have Chris. Back in Michael Jackson's day, he's competing against Prince, Madonna, Springsteen, Lionel Richie. When he was part of the Jacksons, he's competing against Earth, Wind and Fire, Commodores, Al Green, Rick James. Michael Jackson, when they were the Jackson 5, they competing against Sly Stone, The Temptations, Four Tops, OJs. Like Michael Jackson would never say, he might call himself the king of pop, but he would never say, if you ask Michael Jackson, was he better than James Brown? He'd say, no. If you ask Michael Jackson, was he better than Sammy Davis? He'll say, no. Because he knows, like when Michael Jackson studied James Brown, he studied Fred Astaire, he studied Sammy Davis Jr. Like he studied these cats, man. That's like when people, like Michael, you would never hear Michael Jordan say, I'm the greatest basketball player ever. He's I'll let other people decide that. He would never do it because he knows what came before him. So, shout out to Chris Brown, because I don't think Chris Brown would ever say he's the greatest entertainer ever. So shout out to him, because I think he knows who he is as an entertainer. As for today, in this era, I think he knows he's good. I think he knows, no, I can put a lot of people to sleep as far as like killing them on the concert tour, because a lot of cats can't do what I do. But overall, if Chris Brown was in the 90s, I think he would do fine. But would he be the greatest of the 90s? No. If he was in the 80s, I think he would do fine. But would he be the greatest of the 80s? I would say no. Definitely if he was in the 70s, I think he would have been fine. But he wouldn't have been great in the 70s. I think he would have been fine. But if you're saying like Chris Brown is the greatest entertainer who ever lived, come on, Ryan Clark. I like you, man. But I mean, there's no way. If you're giving me Michael Jackson at his peak and Chris Brown at his peak, I'm going to see Michael Jackson. And better yet, let's put Michael aside. Let's go Usher for Chris Brown. If you had Usher at his peak and Chris Brown at his peak, yeah, Chris can fly around and all that stuff. But I don't know, man. I think Usher might get him. He got the roller skating, doing stuff with cherries. Usher knows, man. Usher knows how to entertain in a different way, man. But again, both of these guys come off the Michael Jackson tree. Shout out to Michael Jackson. Shout out to Prince. Shout out to Chris Brown. Shout out to Ryan Clark. I like you, Ryan Clark. But dude, Chris Brown being the greatest entertainer who ever lived? Yes, he sells out stadiums in Africa. Yes, he's been around. He's the only person around since the TRL. I mean, TRL2, TRL, and the 106 in Park era. But if you're talking about like dance, which he's really good at, dance, singing, hits upon hits upon hits, he has a good ear. I just don't know if Chris Brown stacks up the same against a Prince or a Michael. But I'm a Gen Xer, not an older millennial.